The Bobby O Show.
Welcome to the Bobby O Show. My name is Bob Potzner. I'm an attorney in Danbury, Connecticut. And I have a very interesting show to you involving the arts, which I hope you'll enjoy today with two very, very special guests. But before I get into the theme of my show, I would be remiss if I did not make mention of a somber thing that happened on Wednesday night in Washington, D.C. airport area, where 67 people died, including 14 young people who were involved in ice skating at the very young age in the Nationals, who passed away. And dying is part of life, but when people that young die unexpectedly, it's a very tragic situation. I can remember as a very, very young boy in the early to mid 60s, the United States ice skating team was heading to an international event, and all 18 of the skaters on the team passed away. And I remember the reverberation in our country about that. And I saw Nancy Kerrigan, who was a gold medalist for the United States several years ago, tearfully talking about the situation. So we pray for the lives of all those people who passed away. And the one thing I got to say to you is that we're facing very tough times the next 4 years with the new administration coming into office. And I was very upset to see our president of the United States the day after the collision telling his opinion of how it happened, and we don't even know what the details are. So let's all get together, think about what's best for our country, and pray for the families of those who passed away. I think the show I have actually dovetails well, because one way I deal with difficult situations is involving the arts. And today we have an author and his collaborative person. The author is Gary Scarpa, and his collaborative person is his daughter, Mia Scarpa. We're going to talk about 3 books that he's written in the process of writing books and what writing books means to him and getting his message out to the world. So I'm very happy in this somber time to introduce to you Gary Scarpa and his daughter, Mia Scarpa. Hello, guys.
Hi, Bob.
Hi, Bob.
Hi, welcome aboard. Gary, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit about your background, not about the books, but about your background. I'll do the same for Mia, and we'll talk and take it from there.
You bet, Bob. I grew up in Shelton, where Bob grew up. We met each other years ago and played a little basketball together. But I was a teacher in Shelton for 35 years. I was a teacher and then a guidance counselor. I met my wife in a college play. It was the first time I had performed in a play. I'd been performing for some years with a rock band and even as a child in scout and school shows. But this was my first play. And I fell in love with the theater, and I fell in love with my wife. And then as a young teacher, I had the opportunity to start directing the Shelton High School Drama Club. So my wife at the time was a senior in college, and as a team, we took over the Shelton High School Drama Club, and we continued to direct plays for 43 years, 4 decades. That's longer than Gino Auriemma coached basketball, or a lot of other famous coaches as well. So that was sort of our passion. I loved my years teaching. I loved my years directing. In 2005, my wife and I opened a theater that's still going on in Shelton called Center Stage Theater. And so it's 20 years old this year, although we've retired. We don't have the energy for that anymore. And that's basically my story.
Well, you left out 2 very important parts of your story. One is I first met Gary. He's older than I am, but I was a little Cub Scout in Troop 3, I think it was, in Derby, Connecticut, with Ed Strang. And Gary had a fabulous voice, and he sang at the Blue and Gold banquet. I remember his parents were very, very proud of him. And number 2, he didn't mention that he worked at Dutch's Diner in Derby, Ansonia, but I guess it was Ansonia. He and his older brother, who's passed away, were always there, and they were always very good to me. I always got a few extra French fries. Let's see some of those pictures we have, Jonathan, my director, about Gary. This is Fiddler on the Roof. Is this the first play you produced?
No, it was actually our 3rd musical in 1978, but I call it the musical that really put us on the map because it was so well received, and people couldn't get tickets. We did a command performance, which also sold out, and that was a 1,200 seat auditorium at Shelton High School. So we sold about 4,000 tickets to this play, and it was very special to us.
I saw that. I saw that performance. My sister Joan was in the chorus, and it was and Gary and his wife, Fran, are excellent directors. Got some more pictures, Jonathan? Who's this young guy?
There's a young guy with hair. That's a young Gary and his wife, Fran, on the Shelton High School stage conferring before a rehearsal.
That's the old Shelton High School. That's now the intermediate school?
No, this is the current high school, which is on Meadow Street. I started teaching, Bob, in 1974. It was the year that building opened, and then that was the 74-75 school year. And then the next year, Fran and I directed The Music Man in that building, and it was the second play to be produced on that stage. There have been many, many dozens of plays since then.
When they built the new high school in Shelton, I was involved as a high school student. I guess it was petitioning people to vote for the new high school. This is The Music Man, right?
Yeah, that was our first. And I was just marveling. I ran into the parent of one of these kids. These kids, the kids in this picture are currently in the 64 to 68 age range today. That's how old people would be.
Was Sutton Foster in this edition of?
No, I would never have cast her. She's not right for the role.
For those who didn't know, she was in the show with I forget who she was with, her co-star,
Mia.
Who she's now dating.
Hugh Jackman.
That's right, Hugh Jackman. She wouldn't have made it. She was too good a singer. Any other other pictures? What is this now?
Yeah, this was. I just thought I'd throw in a more current picture. This was our production of Les Miserables in 2014, and it's certainly one of the finest productions Fran and I ever directed. Well, I should say, by this time, Mia was involved with us, my daughter Gina. We worked in different combinations, so we've been working in theater for years. I think Mia and Gina came over to the directing side of the table when they were as young as 17 or 18. And so Mia was very involved in the directing of this play. She and I teamed up on a number of plays.
The reason I wanted to show these pictures is because I believe, from reading your books and talking to you a great deal, that the drama activities is a good segue, or was a good segue into your expressing yourselves in writing. Let me go to Mia. Introduce Mia. Mia, shalom.
Hi, shalom. Thanks for having me, Bob. It's so nice to be here on your show. So hello to everybody who's watching. I'm Mia Scarpa. I'm Gary's younger daughter. Also a former English teacher in the Shelton Public School System, although I wasn't there for that long because live theater sort of called me back. And so now I have my hands in a couple of different things. I'm a professional actress in the musical theater and a member of Actors Equity Association. I still tutor English and history, and I work with my sister Gina in her voiceover business as her office manager and assistant. And Gary and I have been collaborating on releasing new fiction books, but we're about to release a nonfiction book, our next piece. We've been working together since 2020 on doing that. So almost 5 years of collaborating in literature, which is a really special thing. And, we'll tell you more about that as the interview continues.
This is a very education-oriented program because those two folks were teachers. I was on the Board of Education in Shelton for 9 years. My first year, I think I was 23 or 24 years old, way back in the late 70s, early 80s. And it was quite an experience to have a 24-year-old kid on the Board of Ed. And actually I had two other folks on the Board of Ed with me, Paula Ellis and Timmy Burke, who were also 24, 25, that age bracket. And we didn't ruin the schools. No. Gary, tell me a little bit about how the segue between your being an educator. You're retired as a teacher, I believe, at this point in time, correct?
Yes.
And the segue from there into becoming a writer. I mean, being an English teacher, it's not that big a transition, but how is it you became a writer?
Yeah, well, when I was a young guy, I will say I was working on my degree in secondary education and in English, my degrees, I should say, because it's really like a double major. But I really wasn't anticipating teaching. I had this idea in my head that I would go away to school for an MFA, a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing. I was very much into the writing scene in college. I had poems published in our college literary magazine, and I was writing short stories and taking all the writing courses in my department. So I imagined becoming some kind of writer, and I wasn't sure what it would be. I thought it could be a journalist. I didn't know, but I just really loved writing. And then I simply fell in love with a girl and an activity called theater, and it changed the course of my life. And so instead, I took a job teaching at Shelton High School. I was lucky; jobs were scarce at the time, but I connected with the superintendent of schools, Mr. Edward Finn, and he hired me, and it was a wonderful opportunity. So so there went writing, because what I will say to the aspiring writer out there is I don't know how anyone could write books, fiction, and work at another job. I mean, some people probably do it. I know someone who published a book while he was working as a lawyer, like you, Bob, but I also know that it took him more than 20 years to write the book. I mean,
Gary, you mentioned about the writing. When I was at Shelton High School, we had some really good writing and English teachers. In fact, I will say to you, I went to Yale undergraduate and Duke Law, and I think I did my best writing my senior year in high school. You know, the teacher would have been, right?
Yeah, I do.
Miss Nicolari.
Bernice Nicolari.
You know, and I went to her class and I was intimidated. Why wouldn't I be, right? I clearly did the best writing I ever did under her tutelage. And when I saw her, I think she was honored a few years ago for her basketball. She was a coach of basketball, obviously, in women's basketball. And I told her that, and she was really, taken by it. But you learned a lot. And so
she was a great teacher. She
was a very good teacher. And we had a very good department. I'm sure you learned from her when you were writing or teaching writing.
She also, when she retired, I'm not sure in what direction, but I know she did some writing and publishing in retirement. I'm not sure what's become of her, but I think she's still with us, last I heard, and maybe still writing.
Gary, you may not know this, but I was in one play in my life, my senior play with Miss Coombs.
I remember her well.
Something about the giraffes. I had like 2 lines and I blew the lines. Mia, so tell me, as your dad got into the writing field, tell me how you sort of joined him in that. What role do you play in his books? And we'll get into his books in a few moments.
Yeah, so in 2020, when the world shut down due to the COVID-19 pandemic, my mom and I had been encouraging my dad to do some more writing. He had always written a little bit throughout my life. He might write a short story or a poem here or there, but he had never really had the time to commit to it because of directing plays, as he said. So he had, there was nothing but time. So we encouraged him to start writing. He did. And as he did, I don't even know, like, there wasn't really a formal, ask of me becoming an editor for him, but we very quickly, almost immediately, became a partnership in writing his books. So the stories all come right from him. He is the writer. I work with him as his editor, but also as his story developer. We work together on character development, on the flow of a story, on consistency of the narrator's voice, things like that, really throughout the entire process from start to finish. When I primarily live in New York City, so when I'm in New York, we do this over Zoom, usually, 5 or 6 days a week, especially when we're really heavy into a novel. When I'm in Connecticut with him, we, meet face to face. We really work on the book together almost from day one all the way through publication. In addition to editing and advising him, I also format the interiors of his novels. I don't do the covers. People have asked me that. I don't do graphic design or anything, but we do have a wonderful cover designer named Mario Lampic, who works with us on our covers. I do the interiors. And so sort of like the 3 of us work together to get our final product out. And it's really kind of a special thing to be able to do as a collaboration.
Jonathan, can you put up on the screen the book Exit 14, the front cover? Okay, that's your first book, right, Gary?
That's right.
Okay, and I read that book. I love the car. If you still had the car shown in that book, the Beetle, you'd have a lot of money, probably more than you made in the book. If you
I wish.
But Exit 14 is a very good book. And I understand you sold over 1,000 copies, more or less, of that book, which is it's a very impressive activity. So how did you go from, gee whiz, I want to be a writer, to actually writing a book? How'd you go about making your theme on that particular one? Then we'll get to the other ones. How did you go about making a transition from I want to do it to I'm going to do it?
Yeah, well, I sat down, and what I found is the story. I had an idea for the story in mind, as I always do, and I would say the story just poured right out of me. Never did I have writer's block for a minute. I probably wrote the first draft within 2 months, and then the way Mia and I work, we revise and revise. I probably write 5 or 6 drafts before we're ready to publish. But in the process anyway, I was researching how I would go about publishing, so I could go the traditional route and try to get a major publisher like Simon and Schuster to publish it, in which case I would need an agent who would submit it. And then a fact you may or may not know about someone like J.K. Rowling, who wrote Harry Potter. She was rejected. Harry Potter was rejected by 12 publishers before she finally got someone to publish it. And of course, look how huge it is today. But that's a really important point. So I was thinking, one of the things that inspired me to write, besides that I had the time during COVID, was my brother had passed away. He died of leukemia in January, right before COVID in 2020. And the book is based a little bit on my life with my brother. A lot of the book takes place at Duchess that you mentioned earlier. So I was thinking my brother died at 71. And to use that example, J.K. Rowling got rejected 12 times. And I was thinking, it takes time to get rejected 12 times. It doesn't happen in a week. It happens over the course of years. And I thought, I want to get this published. And I also felt I have other books I want to publish. So I also, in my research, found that I could self-publish. And through Amazon and other platforms, you can self-publish. So I decided to hire myself a cover designer, and Mia and I rallied ourselves together, and we ended up publishing that book, and then 2 more. So within less than 5 years, we have written and published 3 books. And
it's interesting to say that when you're writing, things pour out and you don't have writer's block. I do 2 kinds of writings at least. I do professional writing as a lawyer. Although as lawyers get older, other younger people do a lot of the writing and things for you, but I still do a lot of the writing. I just did a 60-page brief that I was involved with, and that's a different kind of writing, more precise, more technical. Although sometimes I try to write it. If you read this brief that I just submitted, it's somewhat narrative, like a novel might be as you tell the story. But that takes a lot of specific type of time. When I write stuff like speeches or presentations that are not legalistic, if I write a letter, I still write letters to people sometimes, that just flows out. And so I can really relate to how it can flow out. Just you get the idea in your head, and sometimes I'll be in the shower and I got to put that in the thing. And so it's very important. Now, Mia, what role do you play when Dad has this wonderful idea and then you have to tell him, Dad, may not be
Well, actually, so Gary's and sorry, everybody, I call him Gary most of the time when we're talking about professional things, because I think it's easier for us to collaborate that way. But he's very open to feedback, which is awesome, especially when you're working on literature, because there are some things that you just have to try out as an author to see if they work. So when he has an idea, usually I encourage him to please write it so that I can read it. Talking about it isn't the same as reading something creative that he's written. So I always, when he has an idea, I'm like, write it. Let's see it on paper. And then if I think it's not working, I do tell him that. And either we rework it, or sometimes it does end up on the cutting room floor. But I think that because my dad has been involved in the arts for such a long time, he knows that things don't always work. I remember times when we were directing plays together. He and I were a directing team for musical theater for about 10 years. And I remember times where I would choreograph a dance number or a production number and show it to him. And he would be like, "It does not work." And so I had to learn from a young age, being in my 20s and 30s, to let go of things that I had created, because it didn't always serve the entire piece that well. And there were many times where I started all over again. I'm sure my mom can relate too in times of doing directing choreography with him. It's no different in writing. So I actually enjoy that process of, saying to him, try it out. Let's find out if it works. And sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. But when it doesn't, I have found him to be very receptive to feedback, and we get a lot done. He loves to revise. He sees it as a positive creative challenge to do revisions. So that makes it fun and keeps it really expressive and just really cool to do together.
You made a very interesting point about the fact that you want to get it on paper to see what it looks like. As educators, you know that all students learn differently. And some kids are visual learners and some are auditory learners, and others different kinds of learning. I'm a visual learner. So when I'm getting an idea down, I got to dictate it or write it and see what it looks like, and then revise it. I'm known to be, I edit my letters, and I always tell my clients now, if you want to do something, do it in writing. You do a letter is where you're more serious about it. An email, you look at this carefully, and a text, you just write it crazily. But I think that it's very important for me and for, like you're saying, for your dad, to see the words on paper, to write the words, and then create it. And computers, I don't know how people wrote back when they had typewriters or whatever, because having a computer you can cut and paste and whatever is fantastic. Gary, your newest book, what's the name of that book, please?
It's called Still Life.
You still happen to have it right next to you. Still Life.
Right there.
And that's your third book, correct?
It is, yes.
And tell us a little bit about, it's something like there's a movie called One Hit Wonders, where it's about a band that just had one song, and that's all they had, and that's it. It's much easier, I think, to write one poem, one book, and it's hard to write a book, but one book. But when you go second and third, then it gets more difficult. So tell me, how is it you've become so proliferate in writing?
It's just, theater is such a wonderfully creative art. And I when I retired, I realized that I had a lot of creative juice left in the old tank. And that has manifested itself through my writing. So I wrote Exit 14, and the other two books are really part of a series that started with Exit 14, and I have two more coming. I already have the titles, and they are also part of this series. So Exit 14 was about a high school sophomore named Gabriel DeMarco, and in Still Life, Gabriel is a freshman in college. And so it's a continuation. It is certainly a sequel, although it stands alone. No one needs to have read any of the other novels. So our goal, Mia's goal and mine, is to have each novel stand alone. So that's really, really important. This book is really about Gabriel looking for himself as a 19-year-old. He goes on a road trip in search of what he calls In Search of America, the America of 1970. So it's very much about the late 60s, the pop culture of the time, the political culture, the political climate, the unrest, the assassinations. It's about all that stuff that you and I grew up with, Bob. And so there's a strong message in it. It's a hero's journey where Gabriel is really trying to find the Holy Grail, as we will say. And in this case, the Holy Grail is a meeting that he thinks he's going to have with the famous singer Joni Mitchell. So she's kind of an important character in the book as well.
Did she pave paradise and turn into a parking lot? Is that correct?
She might have done something like that.
Yeah,
but she was a great poet. And that's the book is about so many things. I mentioned the political climate, the pop culture, the music. It's about poetry too. It's about the poetry of people like Allen Ginsberg, but also the poetry of people like Bob Dylan and Paul Simon and Joni Mitchell. So it's really kind of a beautiful representation of this, to me, the most incredible decade and a half that I lived through, which was, around the early 60s through the.
But it's interesting. You talk about the generation we grew up in, and our parents' generation. I'm referring to Gary and me. Our parents' generation, the greatest generation, the World War II veterans, all that kind of thing. And we grew up in a time where you talk about this, we sort of glorify the 60s and 70s. We're more into, the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s. But there were a lot of tragic times. I can remember Bob Nager was the name just hit me. I haven't thought of that name in years. He was a teacher at Shelton High School. I remember he was in Vietnam. And I remember when he came back from Vietnam, it was a major excitement that he came back. And I know there were people, I won't mention their names, of friends of mine whose relatives, Billy Kunzik's a friend of mine from high school, and he lost a relative to Vietnam. So we kind of glorify, I think it's sort of called in psychology, cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance, that's like where, see, I have some ideas beyond the law, right? Cognitive dissonance essentially is you have someone who goes to captured, like the Israelis may have been were captured by the Hamas, etc. And you kind of, in cognitive dissonance, you kind of relate to where you are and you make it seem better than it was. But we had some tough times in the late 60s, early 70s. And I think part of our society today, you may want to comment about it, Mia, since you're younger than the two of us, I don't think this generation of kids in their 20s and 30s, we had the Holocaust and World War II and Vietnam and Korea, all those different wars that our parents were involved with. The kids now don't really have that. And I'm not sure if that impacts their political involvement at all. Do you have any comments about that, Mia? You're my young person to ask that question.
Well, actually, we do talk about the different generations in this family a lot. And actually, I do think, Gen Z right now, young people right now, and even children younger than them, Gen Alpha, kids who are in elementary and middle school right now, I actually do think that they're starting to wake up to the troubles of the world more so than my generation did. I was a child of the 80s and the 90s. And not that there weren't horrors at that time too, but I actually think kids are more, it could be because it's the social media era, but I do think kids are more in tune to what's going on in the world. And interestingly, in my dad's books, the character Gabriel DeMarco, because he lives in an era where there isn't so much access to information, he is discovering, as Gary said before, the America of 1970. He's kind of discovering really what's going on in the world by leaving the small bubble of his hometown and really starting to learn about what's going on and what he needs to care more about. And so that's something that we really try to capture in the novels in general, is how do young people become really aware of the troubles of the world and what they can and sometimes can't really do about those things. And so we really try to bring that into the books through this character of Gabriel, who as Gary said, in our current book is about 19 years old.
You talk about growing up, and Gary, in fact, started the show by saying he and I grew up in Shelton. I'm not sure if I've grown up yet. But that's a story for another time. This time of the show has gone by very quickly. You're both very interesting people. Gary, we didn't have a chance to talk more about your book, but that's okay. If people want to find your book, I'm sure they can find it online under your name. We won't put the website now, but do you have a website?
I have a website that's simply GaryScarpa.com, and my books could be found on Amazon or Barnes & Noble's websites.
Okay. I really appreciate you coming on. You've been on before, Gary, and I appreciate, Mia, your involvement. And I think the book he showed with the new one, the covers are excellent. And I'm sure you had a large part of being involved in that. And so I appreciate your efforts and your involvement. And Gary, thank you very much for coming on the show again. And
Thanks.
You are really a credit to the city of Shelton, Connecticut. And remember, I'm Shelton born and Shelton bred. And when I die, I'll be Shelton dead, even though I live in Richfield, Connecticut. This has been Bobo Potsner on The Bobby O Show. Thank you so much. Be well.